I don't know.
There's a limit to what I want my machinery to do for me, to be honest.
On the other hand, if you were having a pee and it stopped the boat, it prevented you from crashing into a whale that had popped up in front of you, you'd be quite grateful for it.
I don't know.
You wouldn't. You'd rather just hit the whale.
I'd rather be responsible for my cock-ups and responsible for my successes, and my machinery just back off and let me enjoy my life a little bit. Welcome to Series 2, Episode 3 of Boat Nuts, the podcast about all things boaty. This is Hugo Andreae, editor of Motorboat and Yachting magazine, and I'm Alex Smith, deputy editor of that same magazine. So Hugo, where are we today?
We are down at Hamble Yacht Services and on board a rather special boat. Behind us here is our office for the day. It is a Prestige M48 Power Cat. You can probably see the couple of hulls sticking out there. So particularly interesting boat this, partly because of the way it's designed. It's got that really special owner's cabin that spans both bows, and also a really voluminous boat. So on a 48-foot platform, you get a lot of space. Now, this particular one is on sale through Ancaster Yacht Sales, and starting price about £1 million, but by the time you've added a bit of kit and paid your VAT, realistically you're looking at a price of about £1.5 million. But you do get a lot of boat for that money, and we'll take a bit of a look inside in a minute.
That's right, you do get a lot of boat, and I've got to say, by Power Cat standards, that's a great looking boat as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it does, really attractive.
Now, before we go any further, I need to point out that Series 2 of the podcast is sponsored entirely by Sleipner.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sleipner, marine technology brand based in Norway, really high quality engineering, very good build, really reliable kit.
Yeah.
Best known probably for their thrusters, both bow and stern thrusters, and their stabilizers, particularly the curved fin stabilizers, both hydraulic and electric. So really good quality company, absolutely delighted to be partnering with them on this series of the podcast.
That's right. We spoke about their vector fins last week, and they're absolutely brilliant bits of kit. Now, today, as ever, we're going to discuss three things: a boat, a product, and an issue. And the boat of today, well, that's something quite special, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the flagship of the Blue Game range, the new BGX83, launched at Dusseldorf just a few weeks ago. Really interesting boat. The whole brand is interesting, actually. They do completely different style of boats. It's a little bit like a kind of Italian designer adventure boat, sort of Botnia Targa, but way more luxurious and very Italian in everything it does.
Yeah, and the way they organise their deck spaces, it's almost confusing to the mind until you're on board, and then it just makes sense, doesn't it? It's
cool boat though, so we're going to have a good chat about that.
Brilliant kit. And our product of the week, well, it's interesting. It's very much of the moment. It's AI-assisted collision avoidance, and there's a few systems you can invest in these days.
Yeah, a couple of new companies in that space now using different technologies to achieve the same thing, but hopefully it will mean far fewer groundings and boat crashes in future. So really clever bit of technology. Yep,
and as for our issue of the week, well, that's interesting. I think everyone's going to have different opinions. It's the location of the owner's cabin, and of course if you own the boat, that's all important, isn't it?
Absolutely, so several different competing factions as to where that should be and what the benefits are. So we'll talk a bit about that and have a look at the owner's cabin on this one, because this is a prime example of that.
Absolutely, well worth doing. Let's go and take a look right now, shall we?
Let's do it.
Cool. Right then, let's get straight into it with our boat of the week, which is a boat you saw in Dusseldorf, the Blue Game BGX83.
Absolutely, it's the flagship of the Blue Game range. Really interesting brand, actually, Blue Game. I don't know if you know a lot about the history of them, but they're part of the San Lorenzo group.
Yeah.
And they were founded by a chap called Lucas Santello, who was actually an Olympic sailor. But he created this entire brand as a kind of Italian adventure motorboat brand. So a little bit like a sort of very high-end, luxurious adventure version of something like a Botnia Targa.
Yeah.
You know, they're quite different looking. They've got reverse angle screens. They look kind of chunky. They make a big deal about the fact that they've got very secure seakeeping, you know, big walk around decks, tall bulwarks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But very luxurious inside. So it's that quite nice sort of contrast between the roughy-tufty exterior looks and a very high-end luxury sort of designer finish inside.
High-end luxury, definitely, and they look it. But are they quite as custom-friendly as San Lorenzo yachts themselves?
Probably not quite to that degree, but you can customise the interior, certainly in terms of fit and finish, and they offer a number of sort of bespoke interiors. This particular one had a Lissoni interior. So yeah, it's just a very interesting blend between trying to get that sort of off-road adventure. It's almost like sort of Land Rover Defender type style, but the finish of a high-end Range Rover.
Well, when you talk about the Lissoni interior, I'm probably being a bit mischievous and putting you on the spot here, but didn't you have reservations about the degree to which that sort of leveraged the potential inside that boat?
Yes, a little bit. I think it compromises some of the functionality, and Italians don't seem to mind that. They're quite happy to sacrifice a certain amount of function for that really high-end style. Yeah. So, but I think that's a bit of a red herring, because the boat itself is very unusual and very interesting. The way the whole sort of layout and the flow around the boat is completely different to almost anything else out there.
Well, as a flagship of that fleet, it's exactly what you'd want, isn't it, to be honest with you?
Yeah, and they make a point that, this is not meant to be a mainstream boat that's going to appeal to everyone. In fact, I think one of their strap lines is not for everyone. So it's a kind of boat that you either get or you don't, because it's just such a different list of priorities and layouts.
Well, the first thing I did not get is that you got an enormous vessel with what appears to be no hull windows at all.
Okay, so that is just an optical illusion. It does have hull windows, but in fact, with the whole San Lorenzo fleet, they've started using these printed graphics on the window. So it's tiny little white dots, so that from the outside, it looks like it's a completely solid hull. And that adds to the whole sort of appearance of this is a rough, tough trawler, not
it
trawler
kind of works
style.
That, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
But actually from inside, you don't really notice it, and it's pretty much like a normal window. There's a little bit of shading. It maybe doesn't have quite the sort of transparency, but effectively from inside, it looks clear. From outside, it looks like a solid part of the top side. So.
All right, so as I kind of intimated in our introduction down on the pontoon, when I think of Blue Game yachts, I think of being a bit confused by the deck layouts, but very kind of satisfied once I step on board by what that actually means for the way it feels,
Well, their sort of starting point, they were one of the first companies to really go big on the whole beach club idea.
Yeah.
So, and this 83-footer has an enormous open deck area, and they deliberately leave it open without sort of furniture on, so that you can put a great big tender on it. You can have, I think it's a 4 metre or bigger tender on board, but it just adds to the whole flexibility of it. So you can use it as a big party space if you want to. You can put your freestanding furniture, you can put sun pads on there, you can do whatever you like with it, and that's sort of part of the point, to have a much more open boat that is for the owner to use how they want to use it. Of course, the big difference with this one is that they've also fitted a really big folding platform down the starboard side. So you open that up, and that increases the deck space even further. It means that obviously it improves the views when you're on board. So if you do put out your freestanding furniture or sun loungers, then you look straight out to sea. But it's just, again, that whole kind of modularity to let the owner decide how they want to use it, rather than the manufacturer dictating, you must have your bolted in bench here, you must have your table there.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, because you look at the scale of this boat, the parameters, and you think, well, you could pretty much put the owner's cabin anywhere and do whatever you like with it. But presumably, because they got that enormous aft deck space, what they've done is given you essentially an aft cabin for the owner to take advantage of that.
Yeah, almost more than that. And again, this was one of their big kind of USPs, that it actually has a lower saloon. So the beach club, rather than going up to the sort of cockpit and saloon, it actually drops down from there into this fabulous lower saloon, which is pretty much at sea level. So your windows are only just above the surface of the sea, but it's a very cool feeling. It's got sort of sloped glass doors that slide apart. They're sort of watertight when they need to be, but when you're at anchor, you can open them up. And then you've got this lovely flow between the inside and the outside. You've got this big deck space, and then it drops down into a lower saloon with windows almost at sea level. Yeah. And that then flows through again into the owner's cabin. So for the owner, it feels a little bit like you're in your own private apartment, not just with your own sort of sitting room area, but also your own deck space. You can just imagine waking up in the morning, you throw the doors open, you walk through the lower saloon onto the deck, plunge into the sea, have a bit of a swim, come back on board, and it's like this whole sort of apartment area becomes yours. Obviously, it's during the daytime, the guests use it too. And in fact, it has sort of dual access. So there's the steps up from inside in the lower saloon up to the upper saloon, but also from the outside, you can come from the sort of raised cockpit down into that beach club area. So there are lots of different sort of flows around the boat. And during the daytime, it's an open guest space, but at night or first thing in the morning, it feels very much like you're in a different part of the boat to your guests, because you have your own access to your cabins. They go down a different staircase.
I haven't seen much from Blue Game, but I would have seen that principle on smaller boats in the fleet, wouldn't I?
Yeah. So they do a similar kind of layout on the BGX83, I think it is. They've also started doing these unusual catamarans, Power Cats. So they've got this little BGF45 foiling catamaran. So they're very, very innovative company. I think they're definitely pushing the boundaries. But there are, I think, there are some payoffs, some sort of compromises because of those really deep, safe walk-around decks. And I had a chat with Luca about it on board, actually. He said, I don't think I could design a boat without walk-around decks anymore. I think he believes they're such a sort of fundamental part to have that safe, easy movement around the boat. And this particular one has a fabulous foredeck lounge. Again, very sort of deep set, very secure, lots of seating, tables. And when you moor stern to in the Mediterranean in particular, it's really important to have that area because the back end of the boat, the stern, is effectively open to the quay and whatever passing traffic's going on there. Whereas the bow, you're sticking out into the marina, is much more private, much more secure. And of course, it's just a second space when you are at anchor in that beautiful bay. You can have one whole gathering on the foredeck, another whole gathering on the beach club. It's just a lot of really safe, secure, comfortable outside deck spaces.
Yeah, it
for
feels
guests
like a
to
bit of
enjoy.
a counterpoint from the deck layouts from the kind of open plan configurable aft deck. So the bow lounge is essentially fixed furniture and a.
It is fixed furniture. It's quite adaptable because you've got tables that sort of go up and down and sun pads and seats and everything else. And in fact, this is the first Blue Game with a flybridge too. So you've got that foredeck space, you've got the beach club, and then you've got a central flybridge. That they've kept very, very open. Again, there's just a kind of central island of furniture in the middle of it, but they've deliberately, it's just glass screens all the way around. The one at the show, they haven't fitted a hard top to. They're talking about a hard top, but at the moment it's very open. The screens are all very low. So perhaps not the most practical or usable of spaces, but by keeping it open, it looks very low. It keeps the profile of the boat nice
It's
and low.
not huge either, is it, by the standards of the size of the boat?
It's quite a big space, but unlike, if you had a conventional 80-foot flybridge yacht, you'd have you'd have a big dinette up there, you'd have sun pads out the back, you'd have lounging space,
and all sorts, wouldn't you?
and this is much more minimalistic. You've just got this central island of furniture with those sort of weighted backrests that you can move around. There's a little fridge, there is a helm station, but again, style is such a big part, such a sort of selling point of the whole boat, that they weren't going to compromise the looks by having loads of furniture and tall screens and hard tops. They, again, keep it open, use it how you wish. I'm sure they can adapt it if you want a bit more, if you want some kind more of an extensive wet bar up there, but ultimately it's more about that style, and they are meant to be really good boats. So I've tested a couple of them. I haven't tested this one yet, but it has triple IPS drives underneath that platform. So again, by keeping the engines tucked well out of the way underneath that beach club, leaves more space forward for cabins and so on inside the actual hull.
I've got to say, it's a fantastic looking boat. I like it a lot. Quite masculine looking, quite potent, quite purposeful. Does it have serious pretensions to being a kind of long distance adventure machine, almost an expedition boat?
I haven't tested it yet, and it's hard to say for certain. I don't think it's particularly aspiring to be really long range, sort of ocean crossing type thing. It's still a planing hull. It'll still do 30 knots. I don't think it has a crazy size fuel tank. It's a category B design, so it's not full on category A ocean crossing. It is more of a boat for cruising, from marina to marina or bay to bay, but just with a very different sort of style. And there are some, it does have some compromises. The saloon is relatively small because of those walk-around decks. For an 80-foot boat, it's not as big as you get, but looks very stylish. You've got a nice protected helm station in there. cabin space is not huge. Even the owner's cabin at the back there, because you've got that lower saloon, it doesn't really matter, but it shares the beam with its own bathroom. And normally on a boat that size, just the sleeping area itself would be spread across the full beam, and then you'd have bathroom behind it. In this one, you have sort of 2/3 of the width for the sleeping area, and then the other third is given over to the bathroom.
But in spite of its natural integration with that lower lounge and the aft deck and the sort of fun party platform up there, it's still got proper division, proper separation from the guest cabins further forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a key thing, that whole sort of privacy. It's having a separate access. You come in through that lower lounge at the stern, your guests go forward and down a separate staircase, so it feels like you're living in two different halves of the boat.
Yeah,
and that is a real benefit. It feels like you've got your end as the owner, they've got their end as the guests.
And how many guest cabins do we have further forward?
So you've got 2 double guest cabins, and then the whole bow area is for crew.
So it's actually quite a hard-working lower deck as well, despite the loveliness of
quite a lot of different spaces on it, but not as big as you would feel as if you had something like a Princess Y80 or some such, where you get that massive full beam owner's cabin, you get probably 3 more really decent guest cabins. So yeah, different sense of priorities, completely different style, and as they fully admit, not for everyone.
But you and I have intimated in previous podcasts, haven't we, that isn't it just refreshing? Maybe because we see loads of boats, as part of the day job, but isn't it lovely when you come across a company with the courage not to just design things, but to build those things that are different and put them out to market? It's
absolutely,
lovely,
and if you are the kind of person who likes it, no other boat is going to do. You're not going to go, well, shall I have this or shall I have a Princess or a Sunseeker? It's just not like that. You're either going to be in one camp or the other. Not cheap, mind you. It's 5.9 million euros, I think, the starting price. So, but at that level, frankly, you're going to buy what you want, not where you save a few quid.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, interesting company, interesting boat, flagship model. I think that's as big as they'll go, because they're starting to tread on San Lorenzo territory at that size, and the San Lorenzo SXs are not completely dissimilar. But yeah, I admire it. I like it. It looks cool, and it has a different package that I think is going to appeal to a certain type of person. Yeah,
same here. And to be honest, if any of our listeners or viewers have the opportunity just to step on board a boat by Blue Game and feel how that ingenuity with deck layouts works, how it feels, it makes a big difference just to looking at the deck layouts on a screen. Actually stepping on board, the way it feels is something special.
Yeah, and there are all these different flows, because you can go inside through the boat, you can go outside up to the decks, and the fact that you've got an upper saloon and a lower saloon, you've got that forward bow lounge, you've got the beach club aft, lots of different spaces, totally different design. Go and have a look. Good fun.
Yeah, brilliant. Well done, Blue Game, I think. Fantastic bit of kit. Now, our product of the week is, it's interesting, AI. I'm not sure I completely trust AI. I'm not sure you completely trust AI.
I don't for a lot of things.
No. Well, it's interesting because we're going to talk about early warning systems, but I was talking to you this morning about how one of our writers who commissioned, Will Brocklebank, who commissioned a Rustler 41 with a specific intention of going and having a look at the UK's offshore lighthouses. Well, he's been using AI to sort out his nav planning by just inputting the tide times and the tide strength and direction and the various hazards, the bolt holes and so on, just so it can clean up the ease with which it delivers course and timing. And you think, my God, that would be so much easier, because nav planning's a bit of a ball ache if you're not really used to it. But what you really want to talk about is a different application of AI, which is in relation to early warning systems,
sort of early warning or anti-collision systems.
And there's a couple of systems you've been looking at lately.
Yeah, the two sort of competing or arguably complementary technologies, but one is a company called SEA.AI and the other is a company called Watchit. But ultimately, they're both trying to do the same thing, and that is to use technology to give you advance warning and prevent potential accidents, whether that's collisions between boats or collisions with semi-submerged containers or, God forbid, a MOB, a person in the water, or in fact, certainly as far as Watchit is concerned, for groundings, for unintentional groundings on shallow reefs or sandbars or whatever it may be. But what's so clever about them is they're using technology that already exists, combining that with AI sort of algorithms and recognition systems to compare what it is they find, and then working out whether that presents a risk or not. So if we look at, SEA.AI first, they use a system of very high definition cameras, and you can have both conventional cameras and thermal imaging, and they scan the path in front of the boat, and then the algorithms essentially analyze every single pixel in that screen live constantly to see if there's anything on there that doesn't look like it's water. So in theory...
So is this solely above the surface? Really?
So this is solely above the surface because the cameras can't see under the surface. They can see it at night, but it will pick up anything as small as a human head,
wow.
they say. So anything could be like a fish pot. And we know, cruising around, particularly in the Mediterranean, there are fish pots everywhere. And it's so easy to pick one of those up in your propellers, and that's really going to spoil your day if you hit one of those.
Is it going to talk to me about a seal that pops up for a little look about?
It will flag it, but it should recognise it. That's the beauty of it. So that's where the AI comes in, because it has all this this huge sort of data bank of different sightings of whales and mammals and seals and people and buoys and rocks, whatever it may be. And it will compare what it finds with its own data bank. If it's not sure what it is, it'll say unidentified object, but 9 times out of 10, it will know what it is, and it'll say there is a ship in the way, there is a buoy in the way, a navigation mark, or even a whale. It will literally spot, whale spouts and dolphins and things. So really, really clever system.
And this is based solely on its own high-resolution cameras. It's not borrowing information from radar.
No, so this is one of the key differences between the two technologies. But yeah, the SEA.AI uses its own cameras, and part of it depends how high spec you go. You can get a relatively affordable, and they have just launched a new one recently, which is a little bit smaller and a bit more affordable than it has been in the past. So there's a new one called the Watchkeeper, which is from about €4,500. Not cheap, but it's smaller. And certainly compared to its sort of previous generation, that much cheaper. You can fit it on a 30, 40 foot sports boat if you want. But
it's not a huge amount of money by the standards of the options for most boats.
No. And you're paying that much for your kind of MFD and things. You can go much higher spec, and that will give you more range and more detail, and you can add thermal cameras and so on. But yeah, that is essentially its own sort of standalone system that will keep a constant eye. And that's the other thing. A lot of these accidents are caused simply because people either lose focus or go inside to make a cup of tea or have a pee or whatever it is. And the beauty, of course, of a computer is that it never needs to sleep. It never gets tired. It never loses focus. And it's not intended to replace you, but it's an assistant.
So you just got to pay attention to the things it tells you. And maybe use a set of binoculars to check out what it's flagging up.
Absolutely, but it will flag up, and it has a sort of traffic light system. So if it's green, it's not a danger. If it's orange, you might want to think about it. If it's red, time to take a closer look and take action.
Sounds pretty intuitive. So the difference between that and Watchit is that Watchit borrows information from other sources.
It does for most of it. So that was the sort of founding partner. And actually, I had a chat with the founder of it, and he sort of explained to me exactly what brought him the idea, because he was on board a boat. It was actually a client's boat. He's a boat salesman, and they were off cruising around off Greece, and he was chilling out on the flybridge. I think it was a skippered boat, but the skipper had been asked to go and make some lunch. And during that moment, looked like a completely open sea. And suddenly this terrible grinding crunch, wham, they run into an underwater reef. Oh. Obviously, you can't see anything from on deck. But as he rightly points out, all that information was available within the MFD. So, the boat knew exactly where it was. The chart said there was a reef there. Because they were at the wrong scale, they hadn't spotted it initially when they set their path. As far as they were concerned, it just looked like they were out in the middle of open sea. There's nothing for miles around. Very easily done. And he thought, this is crazy. All the technology is there to let us know that there is a problem, that we are going to hit a patch of shallow water, but nothing actually flagged it. So why not let's create something that connects all these different bits of information and actually gives you the key information you need to know. Because as he points out, I mean, a modern car is full of all these anti-collision aids. They've got lidars that tell you if you're getting too close. They've got lane correction systems.
I find it quite annoying, actually.
Well, it can be. It can, and again, one of the things that I really admire about this system is that it does all that, but it only actually alerts you when there is a real present danger. And rather than having a sort of distance-based thing, it has a dynamic alert zone, which is effectively based on time. So it knows how fast your boat is going. It knows whether the object that is coming towards you is, if that's a boat that's also coming towards you at 20 knots, you could have a closing speed of, 40, 50 knots. So that will give you much more warning rather than just having it set at 200 meters. At 200 meters, you've got a handful of seconds to respond if it's two boats closing at 40, 50 knots.
So presumably, given that Watchit is kind of like your number two, your secretary, sort of bringing in all the information together and then feeding you the pertinent bits, it's subsurface as well as surface.
Yeah, so that is the key difference. So it uses information from a number of different navigation gear that you're likely to already have. So it uses sonar, it uses GPS, it uses AIS, and it takes all these feeds together, and it has its own built-in charting software. So if you do plot a route, or the computer plots a route that is likely to be passing close to an island or over a shallow patch, it will warn you before you get there. And it has an independent speaker system. So it is literally a voice warning. It will go, watch it, reef approaching, or shallow water, or boat approaching. And it will give you that audible warning, and it will also overwrite it on your existing chart plotter, your MFD. So a little warning will come up. But it's clever enough to know if, for example, if there is a boat that's crossing your path but going away, and it knows it's going to have passed by the time it gets to you, it won't bother warning you. It won't warn you when you come into a marina because it knows there's lots of other boats around.
And then sounds amazing, doesn't it? It's a bit of a no-brainer. What's the catch? Is it the price?
Well, no. Initially, the catch was that it didn't connect to the boat's radar. So it knows everything that is already plotted, but it won't know if there are sort of a little tender coming towards you, or there is a whale ahead of you, or a person in the water. But they have very recently launched this new addition to it called the Watchit Eye, which is a high-frequency radar, which is very effectively a sort of very accurate but short-range radar, and it's fixed. You just mount it on the mast of the boat, and that will pick up all of these more imminent threats. It's like I say, just a very accurate short-range radar. Again, in theory, will pick out anything as small as a human head floating above the water. So in theory, that will then combine the best of both worlds, because you then have the sort of above water threats from boats or containers or buoys or whatever it is, underwater threats from both your sonar and the charting software. And combined, that should then give you an advance warning of all of these potential threats. But by all accounts, according to the insurers, it is groundings that are by far the most common accident, because if you're paying attention, you shouldn't really crash into another boat, or you shouldn't crash into an island or a rock or something that's charted.
So are we to assume that investing in a Watchit system on board your boat will reduce your insurance premium? Is that where we're going with it?
It doesn't yet reduce your premium. It does actually reduce your excess. So Pantanius have already signed a deal with them that if you have a Watchit system fitted and you do hit a known about or a sort of charted mark, it will halve the excess that you have to pay in any insurance claim. So it's a starting point. The really interesting thing is that technically they could actually wire it into the boat's motors and or autopilot. So it's perfectly possible for it to actually slow down the boat, or maybe even steer it away from the hazard. None of the boat manufacturers have yet gone down that route. I think they're sort of concerned about potential liabilities, or if it, misinterpreted something.
I wonder if I would go down that route.
I don't know.
There's a limit to what I want my machinery to do for me, to be honest.
On the other hand, if you were having a pee and it stopped the boat, it prevented you from crashing into a whale that had popped up in front of you, you'd be quite grateful for it.
I don't know.
You wouldn't. You'd rather just hit the whale.
I'd rather be responsible for my cock-ups and responsible for my successes, and my machinery just back off and let me enjoy my life a little bit. But in principle, that Watchit system sounds amazing, particularly with the radar integration, as you say.
Yeah, well, I think it's two very interesting advances in technology. And sure, it's not going to be necessary if you've just got a sports boat and you're bumming about going out to a bay for the day. But certainly if you're a more advanced, experienced cruiser who is doing night passages and the like across open swathes of sea or ocean, then I think it'd be really reassuring to know that something is keeping an eye out for you for the moments when you lose focus or get a little bit sleepy. And it's not a replacement for it. Don't get me wrong. You absolutely have to still have a lookout, and you will have the pants suit off you if you have an accident and there's nobody there. But it does provide the reassurance of a second unsleeping set of eyes.
I like it. If I spend £6 million on that Blue Game BGX83, I shall invest in a Watchit system to go with it, I think. Yeah,
so, and pricing for that, what do we think? So, okay, so the base unit, the Watchit unit, is around about 5,000. The eye on top of that adds another sort of €6,000.
It's pocket change, really, isn't it? It
£10,000. When did I ever think €10,000 was going to be pocket change? But you're right. I think if you're investing that kind of money in a boat, that seems like a sensible precautionary measure to just avoid that very expensive, very embarrassing, and potentially harmful accident that could pose threat to people, and that's the last thing you want.
The world of modern boats, you take all the age you can get, won't you?
Yeah, frankly, and you've got all that information there. So if there's another bit that just sits in the background, keeping an eye on things and stopping you do that occasional moment of inattention, which could cost you very dearly, it makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, really interested to try that out. Only slightly annoying thing is that for the moment, because it was developed in conjunction with Azimuth, for the first year on larger boats, I'm not sure exactly what the cut-off point is, but Azimuth have the solo rights to have that Watchit eye system on their super yachts for the next year or so. So fair play to them. They helped develop it. In fact, they even sort of suggested developing the eye part of it. So I completely get why they have every right to get first dibs on that. But obviously, as time goes on, a year will be gone in minutes at our age, and it just seems like a kind of technology that really could take off and start to be adopted on more and more boats in the future.
Who knew that we'd come across a product that's so clear cut? Brilliant.
I look forward to sea trialling it. But if it's as good as they say it is, and I'm certainly starting to see it on a lot more boats. In fact, I think I can see a SEA.AI being fitted to that boat over there.
I think you're right.
So yeah, I think it really is
very much
one
to
watch,
isn't it? Yeah,
definitely
brilliant.
one to watch.
Okie doke. Well, from that clear cut
and a useful bit of AI.
Isn't it? To something far less clear cut. That will be our issue of the week. Ooh. And that is the best spot for the owner's cabin. Do you want it in the bow? Do you want it midships? Do you want it in the aft cabin? It's an interesting question.
Good question.
And I've got some fairly firm opinions. I didn't have particularly firm opinions until I stepped on some boats where I thought, actually, that's better. And what do you really want from your owner's cabin? You certainly want separation, don't you?
Yes.
From the guests and from the day spaces.
Yep.
You want volume, decent bit of volume, ideally.
Yeah.
You want refinement in terms of relatively little noise.
Yeah.
You want light and views as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah.
You want all of those things. And when I stepped on board an Absolute, I forget which particular model, but Absolute has quite a heritage in whacking the owner's cabin in the bow.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to rewind a little bit, because the bow always used to be the place where owner's cabin was on boats up to, sort of 40, 50, 60 feet. So back in the day, sort of pre-2000s, almost all the owner's cabins were in the bow, because that was where you had sufficient standing headroom, effectively, whereas under the saloon, there was never enough space. That started to shift in the kind of 2000s, in the noughties, whatever you want to call them, where the idea of the full beam owner's cabin amidships started to take root.
Yeah, and that's moved down to remarkably small sizes.
Yeah, you can get them on certainly boats as small as sort of 48, sort of 45 foot plus. And of course, the benefit of having it amidships is you get the maximum beam there. That's where the boat is at its widest. And by making boats taller, they've created enough headroom under the saloon to therefore have full sort of standing headroom and a full beam amidships. And again, so part of the benefit of that is that you've got wider space. Part of it is, in theory, you get less wave slap. So if you're in the bow cabin, one of the sort of potential issues is you get a little bit of chine slap. So the little flat chines you tend to have on the bows to help the boat get up on the plane and deflect the bow wave. Because that interacts a little bit with the surface of the water, particularly if you're at anchor, then you tend to be into the breeze.
Yeah, just
you get that little wave slap.
Play in the little crevice, won't it? But I genuinely, I like that. I prefer that to a silent cabin when I'm on a boat. I like to hear the water.
It's the sort of white noise background it makes you feel. So yeah, I'm not against that. I'm less keen on anchor chain noise, and that can be a problem. Again, because you have the anchor at the bow, or sometimes even in marinas, if you've got a sort of bow line or a bow warp to the quay, you just get that sort of creaking, stretching noise. And that can be quite unsettling, particularly if you're not used to sleeping on a boat. So that was a sort of, that's the theory why people started to move to the mid cabins, because you're between both ends of the boat. You haven't got any anchor chain, because the sort of hull is submerged where you are. You get less hull noise, you get less sort of slap. In my experience, it's not totally absent. So I spent a few nights on a large Princess, probably sort of 10 years ago now, and you could hear quite a lot of sort of gurgling and so on going underneath. I think partly because now that they've started to use vacuum-infused hulls, they're a little bit thinner and stiffer than a sort of heavy-duty hand-laid GRP hull. So you just hear a little bit more noise, and you still get a certain amount of sort of gurgling and things going on. And the other thing that's changed is the introduction of stabilizer systems. Yeah. So particularly with fins, they tend to be fitted amidships around about where the owner's cabin is. And again, certainly back then, you could hear the hydraulics or the electrics
we've yet
sweeping
to
the fins
first
up and
hand
down
overnight whether the latest systems make such a kind of intrusive racket overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that Sleipner have worked very hard on with their new curve fin stabilizers, they've produced these new electric ones with super high-tech gearboxes that effectively take out an awful lot of the noise. So I've never
Don't forget their posh rubber gaskets that they won't tell us about.
They're magic rubber gaskets
from the hull itself.
But I am intrigued because that could be a game changer if you can have mid-mounted fins that make next to no noise. That could be a game changer.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I'm a fan of the bow cabin. Actually, I'm a fan of the aft cabin as well.
Oh, a proper old school aft cabin.
Yeah, old school aft cabins that makes the back, the arse end of your boat look like a block of flats. Those ones with
like the sort of
windows.
brooms and the Atlantics.
Yeah, kind of. I was thinking more like the Marek's aft cabin cruisers, which are just delicious things. They don't make them anymore.
Ferretti used to do one. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that
there was a company called the Ferretti Altura. And it just slightly randomly, in the sort of mid-noughties, they came out with something called the Ferretti Altura 690 that was a genuine aft cabin boat. It looked a bit more stylish and a bit more sort of modern than the brooms and so on. But you rarely see it now. Almost nobody makes them anymore.
Well, the fact that Marek's had a brilliant award-winning 330 and 370 aft cabin cruiser, they were spectacular boats. It doesn't make anymore because nobody wants them. Simple as that.
It's not really clear why, because it's a lovely thing. You have two cabins at each end of the boat. You have great privacy. You tend to have a transom window, so you have lots of light.
So on the downside, if you're boating in the Mediterranean, as you know, and you're moored stern to, then your cabin's directly next to the pontoon. Yeah, which is not great. I like that separation you get from the bow cabin. I also like the fact you get the extra vertical elevation in the bow. I like the fact it's separated from the pontoon, as I say. I like the fact you get bigger hull windows, by and large, towards the bow than you do amidships or aft.
Well, I think what they've started doing a little bit differently, and actually Prestige are a good example, and even this, but rather than putting it right down at the bottom of the hull, sort of almost down to the bilge level.
That's right.
They lift them a little bit, and they tend to have something under there, whether it's a technical space or a crew cabin or whatever it may be. So you're lifted above it a bit. You don't get so much of the noise from the hull. Because of the shape, because the bow sort of curves in a little bit, particularly if you're moored stern to in the Mediterranean, in a mid-cabin, you're wedged up against other boats and you're effectively peering into someone else's bedroom.
Exactly that.
Whereas because of the shape of it, you get a bit more light for the same reason, because you've got a bit of space between the boats.
That's right.
So,
and on that Prestige, the fact that they've elevated it, it frees it from the most critical point of taper in the hull. So you get actually a broader section of the bow.
Yeah.
So a bigger bed and space on both sides and a little bit more room to play with.
And while we're talking about Prestige, we should mention the owner's cabin on this boat.
I nearly forgot. What a cabin that is.
Yeah.
This M48 is the first Power Cat that Prestige made. It's since done an M7 and an M8, both large boats. And this will become the M6 because they reckon, even though it's 48 foot, it delivers the space of a 60 footer. But realistically, you go down into that bow cabin, because it doesn't sit in either one of the hulls, it spans the two and lowers the bridge deck and uses a bit of foredeck elevation as well. So you've got a full beam bow cabin with windows on both sides, a central bed, lots of space for furniture, and then split facilities, a shower in one hull further aft and heads in the other one. And it is a tremendous space, isn't it?
You wouldn't believe it was a 50-foot boat to have that bigger owner's cabin there and then two further separate doubles, again, both en suite, in a 50-foot or sub 50-foot boat.
It is extraordinary, isn't it?
It's a game changer.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I do want to point out, in order to achieve that, dropping that bridge deck means that you do incur a bit of slap from fairly moderate seas, because obviously there's less vertical elevation
so the
to
bridge
ride
deck,
over
effectively the bridge deck has sort of come down, so it's fairly close to the water now, which is fine in a sort of short chop. But yeah, there is a danger if you get a really big rolling swell, that it will sort of pass between the two hulls and impact the bottom of the of that bridge deck. But
if you haven't been on them, I don't know, have you been on the M7 and the M8?
I haven't known.
Well, let me tell you, what they've done down there, just ramp it up. It's weapons grade on the M7 and the M8. It's unbelievable. That space.
And I guess the extra size means it's higher off above the surface of the sea anyway.
It is, and at the same time, because you've got the extra volume, you can also use a sunken foredeck for a more intimate, safer, more secure kind of bow lounge without impoverishing the headroom down in that full beam bow cabin. So it's an astonishing thing. But before I forget, it's just worth mentioning that the bow cabins are slightly elevated bow cabins we see in the F-line Prestige boats. There's a lovely sense of privacy in those, despite the relatively modest proportions of those boats, because you walk from the side of the helm directly down, halfway down the steps into your bow cabin.
It's just sort of 2 or 3 steps down.
That's right. And that's you. The other guest cabins, further down, further aft, down some more steps. And that difference in deck height feels quite special, doesn't it? Quite exclusive to the owner.
It's a little bit like a sort of duplex apartment or something. You just feel like you're on a slightly different level.
Imagine like a bow cabin on a super yacht on the main deck, where it's a different level to the rest of the guest cabins. It's kind of a small version of that in a way.
Well, that is, and that is now available on much smaller boats than it ever used to be. Now that we've got these sort of tri-deck flybridges from the likes of sort of Sunseeker and Princess that are kind of 80 or 90 feet. And these, because you've got that enclosed upper helm, you can then use that main deck for a main deck owner's cabin. And that really does feel like the best of both worlds, because you're properly elevated above the surface. You don't get any slap at all. You're much further from the engines, because that's one of the downsides of a full beam mid cabin, is that you tend to be next to the engine room. And of course, in the engine room, you don't just have the main engines, you also have the generator.
That's right.
And increasingly, certainly in the Mediterranean, you've got the generator running for the air conditioning, for the stabilizers. So that is one of the downsides of that a midships full beam cabin, is you do get more mechanical noise. But having a main deck or a sort of semi-main deck forward cabin means you're furthest point from the engines, you're elevated above the surface noise from the chines. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
It is, and often they'll it's kind of like the Blue Game you talked about earlier, gives the owner, although it's limited in some respects, access directly to that aft deck. Well, when you get a main deck owner's cabin forward, often you've got private access to a little terrace on the side, or to a little bow space for private breakfasts. You know, just you and your partner, which is a lovely thing. And it then leaves
that other space spare for a really good VIP. So a lot of these boats are effectively sort of, they've got almost dual owners cabins. So some of those big Absolutes and Prestige and Pearl.
The
72. Is it 72 or was it the 80?
It was a 72, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's got a fabulous... Effectively, you've got 2 master cabins, haven't you?
What a superb boat that is.
Yeah.
You know, I think I was kind of undecided, but I'm totally a bow cabin man. Love it.
You've moved. You've changed.
Yeah, I love it. No, I've never been convinced by midships owners' cabins. I know that we're elevating deck heights in order to give you the space in there, but it always feels like it's kind of forcing compromise a little bit. just to enable
Yeah,
you to have
I
windows
don't
on
know.
either side and a bigger space.
They're pretty special. When you're out in a bay and you've got the full effect of those massive hull windows, you've got a view out both sides, you're pretty close to the water level, you get a lot of space on them, particularly if you have the bathroom behind it, if you have a full beam bathroom, so that provides a bit of extra insulation
Yeah, that's right.
between you and the engine room. They're pretty special.
Well, yeah, but, you know, I don't mean to keep going back to Absolute, but the fact that they use your ensuite quite often in the forepeak means that, again, you're doing away with the most critical point of taper for a space where you don't spend a tremendous amount of time. And then you get a much, much broader, more voluminous main space.
You know what the answer is?
About 8 boats each.
Well, no, I just think we each need to spend a couple of weeks on a really nice, big luxury boat, one with a foredeck or a forward owner's cabin and one with a midships. Spend a week on each, and then we can sort this out once and for all. So if anybody out there wants to lend us a nice 70-foot boat with a forward owner's cabin and another one with a midships owner's cabin, I'm sure we'll finally be able to crack the answer to this challenging.
Yeah, we'll be into it. If you could moor them in the Seychelles as well, that'd be perfect, wouldn't it?
That should do just fine.
All right, well, I think that probably brings us to the end of Series 2, podcast number 3. Thanks once again to the guys at Sleipner for sponsoring us with this and making this all possible. And Hugo, time for your MBY plug.
Yeah, of course, I cannot resist it. Don't forget that if you've enjoyed this podcast, our day job is in fact running a magazine called Motorboat and Yachting. Goes into a lot more detail, a lot more considered, a lot less nonsense, and a really great read. So if you like listening to this, go to www.mby.com, subscribe to the mag, and hopefully you'll find even more of what you enjoy there.